The following program may contain strong language and mature content. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to She is Shenomenal. I am your host, Tasha Champion, the Shenomenal Coach of Champion Empowerment, always teaching you to love the champion you are. We have a great show for you tonight. Heads up, it can be a sensitive topic. But before we get into that, I just want to check in and see how all of you are. How was your week since we were last together a week ago? And thank you for everyone who tuned in on the premiere of She is Shenomenal last week. To tell you a little bit about my week, it's been pretty chill. I actually had, for most of you may know, I'm a breast cancer survivor and I had my annual checkup. All clear. Things are still continuing to be as healthy as possible, which is always a gift and a blessing. And let's see. Um, Other than how windy it's been these last couple of days, that's been pretty much it. Work, rest, repeat. Work, rest, repeat. And if you can hear, you hear me saying rest. Make sure that you guys are resting in between everything that you do. It is so incredibly important for you to reset by having a rest. And that doesn't mean just sleeping, that means sitting and doing absolutely nothing. All right. So we're going to dive into our Shenomenal week so I can tell you guys about some great upcoming things. All right, so first, we are going to talk about my mammogram challenge. Again, I am a breast cancer survivor and I push for women to get their mammograms. It is crucial and very important to give yourself the best chance if something is found that you have early detection. So with that, I created the mammogram challenge back in 2019 and we ran it for the whole year, and someone won a really great, incredible gift basket of like over 100 things. I had things donated from True Religion, from the San Diego Chargers. It was just a combination of a lot of things to celebrate you getting your mammogram. It's important. So I want you guys, if you are over 40, you need a mammogram if you have not gotten one. Now, because we were dealing with COVID, I am backdating. If you got your mammogram in 2020 or 2021, you are still eligible to register. So head on over to themammochallenge.com and make sure you register. Call one of your friends and tell them, hey, girl, we need to get our mammograms. It's super important. Okay. And just so that you guys know, I'm a person who had a mammogram. Unfortunately, my mammogram didn't show anything, but the cancer was still found in time. So make sure that you give yourself the best chance at all at anything related to health. Don't feel something and then wait on it. So go get your mammograms today, register, and then when you register, make sure you come to the second annual Shenomenal Women's Brunch, because that is where I'm going to announce the winner. July 9th in Fontana, California at the Hilton Garden Inn. This is where I am bringing just incredible speakers together to awaken your Shenomenal life. Whether you are already woke, whether you need to enhance what you're already doing, my goal always is to make sure that women and men are living their best life. And my speakers, y'all, are fire. I'm talking about fire. They are going to bring massive experience, massive value, and massive motivation so that you can walk away and take action on the things that you want out of life. So come on out to the second annual Shenomenal Women's Brunch, get some good food, get your spirit filled, listen to some incredible people share their stories, and let's just all grow and glow together, because that is what Shenomenal women do. Okay? Next, I am so happy to talk about our Shenomenal Woman of the Week. Yes, every week I want to put a spotlight on a Shenomenal woman. And this week it is Javon Sanders. I am very honored for her to not only be my friend, but to recognize her as someone who in 2016, what she saw was there was a need for healthy food in disadvantaged communities. We all know that there's so much fast food, so much unhealthy food, but who was doing something where you had an option to not have to spend, $17 and $20 just for a salad? We all know a lot of people say, well, I can't get a salad because they're too expensive and it's cheaper to get like a $5 meal. Well, Javon has taken care of that. So I want you to join her on her mission to raise awareness on healthy eating. Toss It Up Salad, not to be confused with the place in Gardena, but Toss It Up Salad by Sanders. You can reach her at the Compton Farmers Market the first Saturday of every month. Every Sunday, she's at the Wellington Farmers Market in Los Angeles. And every third Sunday, she's at the Compton's Black Excellence Exchange inside the grocery outlet. So this is your opportunity to, one, support a small Black business, two, support a female business, and three, get a delicious salad. And she has some really good teas to wash all of that down. Javon, I am so honored and so proud to highlight you as the Shenomenal Woman of the Week. Keep glowing, keep showing up, and keep on being phenomenal. Thanks, Javon. All right, guys. I am ready for you guys to watch this interview that I did with Jireh Shoe. Advance warning again, there can be some sensitive topics and triggers in this interview. We are talking about the behaviors that hide in the church, thrive in the church. And what that means is that when leadership inside of churches know that there are some unhealthy habits going on or some shady things going on in the church and no one is speaking about it, those are bad behaviors that you are allowing to thrive. And a lot of times we're giving people this slap on the wrist when really they need to be escorted out. So just understand, again, this is very sensitive for some people, but I want you to watch the power of this young lady and how she was able to bounce back. Now, I decided at kind of the last minute, I'm going to bring her back next week because there was so much to really unpack. Because I really want to make sure we are very clear on what can be happening in the very places that we trust. So we're gonna watch this interview, and then she's gonna be back next week because we're gonna dig a little bit deeper. I want to make sure that when you go to places, when your children go to places, including church, that you know that they are safe, you know the things to look out for, and that's what this interview is all about. So let's get ready to watch Jireh Shoe and behaviors that hide in the church, thrive in the church. Welcome. I'm so excited to talk to you, Jireh, because you have a very impactful story. And while we may not get to all of it today, I know you have found your purpose, your calling, and you have now become an advocate for speaking up for young girls who are being manipulated or abused by narcissistic pastors and leaders of the church, correct?
Yes, yes, that's correct.
Okay. So let's talk about that a little bit. How did you come to this being your calling and wanting to protect these young girls?
Ever since I was a little girl, I've always loved counseling and talking to people, specifically concerning this topic. It wasn't until I experienced sexual abuse in my church. The grooming started at a young age. I would want to say 12 years old, and the actual actions of sexual abuse and sexual assault occurred at 23. And so going through that scenario, not having the support and not understanding what a narcissist is, not understanding narcissistic traits, characteristics,
Mhm.
I took it upon myself, knowing that it was my calling at that point from God after I walked through my 6 year healing process to start advocating for young women and women in general in church and young men, to start being able to pinpoint those inappropriate types of behaviors that are displayed so broadly in the church,
Mm.
and just showing parents what to look out for as far as leaders and what's appropriate, what's not inappropriate. And I've just been trying to raise awareness as to not just dropping your kids off at church and trusting everyone because they say they go to church, right?
Right.
Trying the spirit by the spirit, if you will, or just testing people's characteristics, just watching how people move and
Yeah.
maneuver, and familiarizing themselves with appropriate behaviors, not only that's depicted in the Bible and to read the Bible themselves, but also to study a little bit of psychology, if you will, and just kind of see what that baiting looks like, what that narcissistic baiting looks like, what the abuse, the types of abuse that occur look like, so that it can't be hidden in broad daylight anymore. So that's
Right.
pretty much
Right.
what led me to that, is my experience in and of itself.
Okay, so let's dive a little bit deeper about these experiences. So you were really born and bred and raised directly into the church. So you had a full on belief of how God viewed you and what that was like, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. And this is what you walked and talked and just really lived, right?
Yes,
So,
yes.
how did truly honing in on this is how God sees me. This is how God sees me. I must behave and do this and do this. How was that then used to manipulate you by someone older? What was the age difference? And then what did they do to use that same information to now groom you and manipulate you?
Um, there was a lot of there were a lot of gifts in my church, right? There are a lot of people that had gifts, and so I would like to say that that grooming started at a young age. I was always
Mhm.
dancing, I was always ministering, I was always counseling youth. I had this big light in me that I didn't even recognize at that time, that people were just attracted to and drawn to. I got a lot of favor. I've always had favor. People were always drawn to me, flying me out, paying for card, just a lot of favor from these prestigious people in the church that were connected to my
Mm.
pastor. And I would like to say that a lot of that grooming started at a young age, when it
Mhm.
came to the older women in the church who were supposed to take me under their wing and nurture me and prepare me for womanhood. And instead, I saw a lot of older women's jealousy, right? And so I would say that, and their sneaky disses, or them always trying to put me in this box because they were not comfortable with me shining bright, or they were not comfortable with people being drawn to me, or me always being center stage at the dances that we were doing and people always coming up to me giving these accolades. Um,
Right.
I was trusting these older women to be that type of mother figure that was kind of lacking in my household. And instead of them taking on that role and respecting it and loving me, they were trying to put me in this box. And so it started there. And then it maneuvered its way into, at that time, my pastor doing the same thing, right? You can only shine as bright as I want you to shine. And so he would always take the word and say, in order to do this and in order to be pleasing to the Lord, you need to do A, B, C, and D. But he was taking the word out of context and he was using it to gain control in certain areas. For example, when I lost my virginity at 23, he took the word of God and came and said, the Bible says that only a fool judges matters without knowing all the facts. And then he started to ask me questions like, so, you're not a virgin anymore, but do you masturbate? Do you use toys? Is it inside or out? And so he just started getting way too inappropriate. But at the time, I didn't know what was going on because he told me the Bible said, and so that type of stuff started to occur. But at 23, it was just very blatant. But before 23, you couldn't really see those things being done. And so little things would be done from like 12 on up to where I would bring people to church. And these older women who were supposed to be mentoring me would do things like, oh, you're coming to church with her. But then behind the scenes, oh, are you coming over today? Trying to develop that relationship so that they can get the accolades because they knew that the pastor favored me. Or other pastors favored me. And so in public, they would want they wanted to be known that they were in connection with me, but then at the same time, belittle me. They were always belittling me, always trying to tell me who I'm not, I'm doing too much, and always trying to put me in that box by creating those self-esteem issues, if you will.
Okay. So you have these women that really should be more like leaders and, like you said, mentors, and they are putting you in a box, judging you. And I know that you and I have talked a little bit, but even just judging you at the age of 12 by what you had on and knowing your mom dressed you like a 12-year-old. Okay. So in those instances, now you don't have these women who are here you're supposed to trust. How then does one of the men in the church use this information to now make a connection with you that ultimately led to being completely inappropriate?
So in my family, the family ties at that time were really strained. And he knew that. I would come to him. His daughter was my best friend for years, and I would come to him and I would voice these concerns. Growing up, I always had a very close knit family. We did everything together. It was us and no outsiders. And so when that disruption started to occur and those family ties started to become weak in my life, I brought that to my pastor. And I was always crying about it, always telling him, just normal things that families go through. And instead of him stepping in the place to help those bonds mend and heal, he was manipulating both sides. So he would come to me and say, oh, they're just jealous, and this, and that. And I did not recognize that I was always feeding him this information and telling him these things that he was putting it in his little narcissistic vault. The information that he needed on how to manipulate, how to gain access, because now I've exposed that I'm no longer protected at this moment because my family relationships were so strained. I was into a lot of arguments and there was just a lot of strife between the women in the family in particular, and the women in the family were so strong at one point. And so when that became weakened, he saw an open area. And so he was able to manipulate and get in that between that wedge and utilize it in a very stealthy way that I did not recognize. And neither did my family because they did not know because we were not speaking.
Right. Whoa. So he kind of took an opportunity on you being by yourself, essentially. So give us an example of how he used that lack of family support that you had in that moment, and how he used the trust you were putting in him to kind of have that outlet so that you could have someone to speak to, someone that should have been like a leader or a father figure. Give us an example of how he used that to then manipulate the situation.
When I lost my virginity and I came and I told him, I said, I wanted to wait until I was married. I'm 23 years old. I only had sex one time with one person. I still want to wait, when he started to ask those questions, those inappropriate questions, and then that led to him sexually assaulting me in a vehicle. One of the things that he told me the day that he sexually assaulted me in the vehicle, one of the things that he told me was, what would your mom think about you? Because he knew that my family raised us to, monitor our bodies, protect our bodies, don't be out here sleeping around because they'll call you a hoe and this and that. And he knew that that was important to me. He knew that that's why I wanted to save my virginity. That was a big piece of
Right.
me growing up. And the women in my family were very particular. They were very, very picky when it came to our namesake and protecting our bodies and not just sharing
Right.
that with everybody. Um, and so he knew that. He knew that growing up. We had multiple conversations over the years. You have to understand I was 12 years old when he started taking me out and taking me to lunch and spending time with me. And my whole family was embedded in and rooted in this church. And so at 23, when this occurred, he knew that that strife had occurred and a lot of my family stopped coming. Some still went, my mother still went, my siblings still went, but other ones stopped coming. They either had to work or they were busy. Some joined other churches. And so he saw an open space. And so when I confided in him and I told him that I lost my virginity, he started to say things like, oh, well, what would the world think about you? What about your mom? That they'd call you a hoe, they'd call you fast.
So he already knew that it was really important to you how God saw you.
Yeah.
And you've been raised to believe that you weren't supposed to lose your virginity before marriage. You've been raised to believe that you must maintain this persona, and not even understand who you are. So he used that and then turned around. And now, so not only does God see you in a certain way, but now your parents are seeing you in a certain way and your family are seeing you in a certain way. How did that really make you feel?
When I first left the church after he sexually assaulted me, I didn't tell my family immediately. I told them probably 8 months after I left the church what ended up occurring. But out of fear that he implanted in my head that they would see me in such a bad light, I didn't want to say anything,
Mhm.
And then for me to tell someone, i.e., him, and for him to start telling me I was a whore, I didn't want to go through that again. That was what I grew up to be taught to never be.
Right,
So I
right.
kept things quiet because he manipulated me into believing that if I said things, people would think poorly of me. And so when I finally told my mother, I want to say her words were, "You can't win them all," like, and that
Oh
freed
my
me a
God.
lot to be like, "Oh, looking at me like I'm a whore, like I didn't." And so that impacted me a lot. It impacted me in a lot of my relationships moving forward. Not even being able to share a kiss or hold hands without I'm gonna be hoe. Like I don't want to be hoe, or
Right.
it messed up my mentality. I couldn't even wear spaghetti straps and walk down the street without fear of seeing someone who sat through the meetings where he talked bad about me and badmouthed my name without them thinking, oh look, she's in spaghetti straps. I knew he was right about her. So I couldn't just be free to be who I am and to be a young lady, a young woman in her 20s, without fear of constantly being judged and people's mindset automatically going to she's a whore. That
Wow.
I battled with that for years. For years. I want to say I didn't get free from that until I left the church in 2017. I didn't get free from that until about 2020.
Wow. So, okay, I want to make sure people are understanding because they're hearing I was 23 at the time I lost my virginity. I talked to my pastor about it. And he used a lot of my growing up, the beliefs of me growing up, and what I thought of myself to then use that against me. And ultimately, he sexually assaulted you. And some people watching may think, like, okay, you were 23. Like, how did you let this happen? But I want them to understand, I want people to understand this started when you were about 12.
Yes.
And this started with someone else in the church first, grooming you to believe that it had to be this way and that way. Talk to us a little bit about that because I want people to understand this wasn't some naive 23-year-old who had a crush on a pastor and then something happened and it was just like, oh my God. Like, help people understand the grooming that had taken place over that 10-year period and how in your mind this is all about how God sees me because this is what was implanted into you.
Ooh, so I did not have a good relationship, number one, with my mom. I didn't have a good relationship with my dad. I
Mm-hmm.
had really good relationships with my grandma and my aunts at that time. So you can imagine when I'm 23 and that fell apart, that was everything to me. So
Right.
growing up, my pastor knew that when I was a little girl, I was molested for the first time. I've been molested by 5 people 5 different times. The fifth being at that time, my pastor's nephew. I was
Wow.
14. He was 19. he sexually molested me. He came in and he told me that God told me that you were supposed to be my wife. Again, I was raised that we don't date, we marry. And
Right.
so at 14, he's telling me all these things that God told him, and I was so naive. And so as he's telling me, God said you're supposed to be my wife, he's also saying other things like, I just want you to trust me up until the age to where you're able to marry, but you can't tell anybody about me because they're not going to let you marry me. Right.
So
And
now
so then when
he's completely silencing you to not say anything and using the Bible or the belief in God as part. Okay, go ahead, keep going.
100%. And so when he sexually assaulted me, because I had already been sexually assaulted, I said, well, number one, of course, I internalized it. What's wrong with me? Because that's what happens psychologically. And then the second part is, well, at least this one's my husband this time. And he had already developed this mental state of, you can't tell anybody because you're my wife, and God said you're my wife, and I don't want to mess it up, because if you say something, they're not going to understand because I'm 19 and I'm 14 years old, and I'm looking at him and I'm just like, well, I don't want to get you in trouble, because if you're supposed to be my husband, I don't want them to not accept you one day.
Wow.
Yeah. And so moving forward, he ends up sexually assaulting me. He molested me. And then after that, of course, I'm battling now with the rejection from my parents. I'm battling with being sexually molested so many different times. I'm battling with, of course, not knowing my identity, because what child does?
Exactly. Not at that age, right?
No. And so
Yeah.
at the church, that was the only reprieve I got. That was, my relationship with God as a little girl meant everything to me, because that's all I had keeping me going.
Right.
I always
All you
felt
knew.
misunderstood. Yeah. I always felt misunderstood, and when I saw these women in the church take to me as a mother figure, not recognizing their jealousy, I gleaned from it. I cling to it. I gleaned from them. I didn't have the discernment at that age to be able to tell, oh, you're actually really jealous. Because why would you say that to me? Why would you make me feel less than? Or why are you always belittling me? And I just always called it love, because that's what they called it. But it was really hidden love, but masked behind all of these abusive statements, or always trying to belittle me and make me feel like I'm not anything, special. Like, I remember one time there was a pastor whose son wanted to marry me, and I said, I don't want to marry him. I see him doing this, that, and the third. Like, I don't want that in my life. And one of the leaders who I was very close with at the time, she was a financial officer at the church. She looked at me and she said, who do you think you are to where he has to prove himself? So it was a lot of things that I was dealing with, to where it was like, no one was really seeing what was going on. And then when I told her that I had been sexually assaulted because it was a pastor's nephew, she looked at me and she said, I don't believe that.
So now you don't have the family protection. And usually at that age, especially if you're raised in the church, when you don't have that protection at home, or that family dynamic, you go to the church to then find that. So now you are in the church, and actually your safety has now been broken inside of the church.
Yeah. And it's sad because it is a lot. And I know that there were, in my family, because they were so big on wanting you to keep your virginity and not be out here sleeping around and doing all this stuff. There was a huge shame in my family because of past rapes and molestations prior to me, generational curses that carried a lot of shame. And so they did the best that they could. They did a great job. But one of the things that I recognized, spiritually speaking, was that shame that came with sex. It was almost as if sex was just a taboo topic. Instead of just being relatable, it was always just don't do it because of sex, or don't do it because of STDs or babies or whatever. But like, no one was actually saying you're going to feel these things and it's going to be normal. No one was actually normalizing that God created you to feel these ways and showing you how to maneuver through it. No one was actually talking about that. It was more so, don't do it because they're going to talk bad about you, and all this shame, right? And so unfortunately, when I came out with, when they found out I liked boys as a little girl or something, I was being called fast and this and that. And so that lie from the enemy of calling me fast already started as a little girl growing up. And what they didn't realize was, oh, there might be a shift in her behavior, or there might be a shift and maybe she's recognizing boys, but nobody knew it was because I had been being sexually abused by a
Right.
cousin growing up. And so there was this taboo topic. There was you're fast if you like boys. And now here I am 5 times sexually abused and molested. I'm not saying anything because they're going to think it's my fault because they already called me fast because I like boys, you know?
Right. So you have this dynamic from your family because of the generational curses with previous women. And so they held what happened to them, they held as shame. So now this shame is just lingering down. And now here you are, you need to be protected. There is someone that's 5 or 6 years older than you, knows better, and he's approaching you using his conversation under God as the way to communicate with you. And now you can't go to someone and say like, hey, this person makes me feel uncomfortable or this, because you've been taught that you're fast. You've been taught not to talk about it. You've been taught that, hey, this stuff happens, but you cannot say anything. So your voice had been silenced in a multitude of ways. So then from this nephew to the pastor, your trust became, okay, this is happening and I need to talk to you about it. How did he then manipulate your silence of the nephew to now the silence you would have with him?
Ooh. I didn't say anything for years. So growing up from 14 all the way up, I was very adamant about not dating. I didn't want to be touched by anybody. Leave me alone. I'm tired of going through this. And so when I turned, I want to say 20 or 21, I came out because I went to go visit the finance officer of the church, her daughter, and her daughter was married at this time and she was pregnant with her first child. And when I went to go visit her, I had a conversation. And she just starts crying and she tells me that my pastor at the time, his nephew, did the same thing to her, molested her. She was asleep in the bed one night. He just wakes up and he's in her room while she's sleeping. He just starts fondling her. And they were dating at one point. And so unfortunately, no one believed her. They just called her fast too.
Right.
And so what ended up happening was I ended up finding out that when I was 14, there were 2 other girls that were 12 at the time. So I was 14. This particular girl was about 16 when that happened to her. And there were 2 other 12-year-olds that he was being inappropriate with and doing the same things.
Oh my God.
And then one of my family members, extended family members, it happened to her. And so
by the same person.
Yeah. So now
Okay.
we've got me, 2 12-year-olds, another one, and another one. So there's 5 girls total now that he has done this to.
Enough is enough.
And so I come to my pastor at the time and I let him know, listen, you've got women out here hurting. I want to heal from the situation. She wants to heal from the situation. All these women are coming out saying that this man has done the same thing. And so he told me that if I wanted to go to the police, I could, and that they would support me. And I said, no, I just want you to know, because he was married at the time and he was about to have his first baby and it was going to be a girl. And I said, I just want you to know to protect her. I don't know what happened. I know he was no longer allowed to come to the church. I didn't see him for the next several years of me being there. But what I did not realize was when I said, no, I don't want to go to the police, that he was putting that into his narcissistic vault just to know, oh, she'll protect her abuser.
Right.
When in reality, it wasn't that I wanted, maybe I did want to protect him a little bit at the time. Can't really remember. But I did not recognize what that was doing. I didn't recognize I was feeding a narcissistic pastor. I didn't know he was a narcissist. So,
I mean, most of us don't, because you don't grow up just knowing what a narcissist is. You don't grow up understanding the behaviors of one. And so you don't, and especially this is your pastor. You're not expecting that this behavior would then turn into him using this to abuse you, to mentally and emotionally abuse you, and spiritually abuse you. So we're going to pause right there because I want to talk about that a little bit more and how that led to the work you're doing now and why it matters how we teach our little girls about our bodies, about God and all of that. So we're going to talk about that. We'll be right back.
Media Network is a proactive network focused on providing innovative space for content creators and entrepreneurs. PMN is dedicated to giving its viewers a diverse entertainment experience while helping content creators elevate their production, engagement, and overall branding. To date, PMN has reached over 1 million viewers and listeners internationally, produced over 72 successful shows with high ratings and fanfare, and has housed over 135 content creators, brands, and businesses through entertainment and consulting services exclusive to Pyro Media. Pyro Media Network is a space that makes you feel at home. So if you or someone you know wants to make an impact, then contact PMN by visiting www.pyromedianetwork.com, and we will take your production to the next level.
Okay, we are back, still talking to Jireh about the behaviors that hide in the church also thrive in the church, because when people in the church know what's going on and they are silent about it, you are allowing these behaviors from authority or other people in the church to really thrive because you're holding this in secrecy. So we left off with you telling the pastor that his nephew had not only molested you, but had molested some other young girls, and he left the church. But now the pastor has used the silence you held for so long, the fact that you didn't report it to police, he's now using that in knowing, well, she doesn't really say anything. So talk about some of the things, just give us one or two examples of how that silence became the betrayal because he used it against you.
I would definitely say, looking back, hindsight, I would say that the little things that he would do, like I already referenced the conversations we were having, right? When I told him about me losing my virginity, and he started asking me these very inappropriate questions. I ended up telling my godmother about the questions, and he ended up finding out that my godmom was very upset. And then he reprimanded me and told me, "You're not spiritual. You don't think. You don't know what to say and what not to say. This is your fault." And then starts to tell me things like, "If it comes down to you or my ministry, I'm going to choose my ministry. I'm not letting you take me down." And I'm looking at him like, I would never try to get, because he had already built within the last 11 or 12 years that
Right.
trust that, you're beneath me, but I'm supposed to be helping you. I look out for you as your father because you don't have a relationship with your dad like that. And so he started to manipulate by, if I made a mistake. Like, there was one time I remember coming to his house, this was years ago, and I saw him bringing bags out the car, and I said, "Do you need some help?" If I did, I would never ask you. Doesn't the Bible say that, something about Jesus believing, calling people friends, and you're not my friend? And I'd just be like, "Okay, get the bags yourself." Or, I remember being young and I had this big sweatshirt on one time. It was an NYU sweatshirt, and it was yellow. And I was walking through his garage and I'm shivering. He's like, "Why are you shaking so much?" He was walking me out to my car, and I said, "I'm freezing." He said, "You have a sweater on." I said, "Yeah, but that's all I have." He lifts up the back of the sweater. We're not thinking anything of it, because I remember another time where I was sitting on his financial officer's couch. We were very close. And I'm sitting there and I'm talking to her. We're just going back and forth, and I had a dress on. The dress came down to the middle of my calves. And when I sat down, the slit on the side that came right above my knee, of course, hiked up. I have really long legs. And so he walks in, my old pastor walks into their house, and he looks at me and he just gets quiet and walks out. The next day I see him and he says, "Don't you ever let me catch you wearing that dress in their house again." And I said, "Why? I
Oh.
wear this house in your house. I wear this dress in your house." And he says, "But I'm different." So he created this atmosphere and this mentality that he was like so holy,
Right.
and that he was just a father figure, and he was safe. He was a safe space. I remember one time we were in the kitchen. It was me, his wife, and his daughter, and we were all talking. And then he says, come here, I want to talk to you real fast. He takes me to his bedroom, through his bathroom, through his closet. And he had a secret cutout in his closet that led to his
Oh, my
secret study
Lord.
that only he had access to. And he starts to tell me and my wife know that my daughter is jealous of you, but you need to come down so that other people can stop attacking you so much.
Wow.
Or one time I took these modeling photos and they were so beautiful. I had this amazing photographer. His name is Donovan Films, Cult Films, and he was taking these photos for me, and I was going to post them. And my pastor saw them, and he's sitting there, send these photos to me. So I send them all to him. He's looking through them. He took a few days to talk to me, and then he finally talked to me. He says, "I don't want you posting these." I said, "Why?" He said, "You're not signed to an agency. If people see you, what would they think? Who does she think she is? They're so pretty, though. They're beautiful." So it's
So
always
still
things like
attacking.
that.
Right.
There's always things,
right.
or I got accepted into Cal Baptist. I'm in my program now, but I was accepted years ago. And then he
Mhm.
tells me, "Well, that means that you're going to be leaving to Riverside." And I said, "Well, no, I can travel, I can commute."
Right.
"Well, you should drop out because your parents can't afford that." You don't know what my mom and dad can and cannot. My dad was making great money, but it was just he was 25 years with the
Right.
prison. Like, no, my dad was making great money. And I'm just looking at him like, well, I'm going to take out loans. Yeah, but you shouldn't have to have your parents sign. Isn't that normal? So it was just always a reason as to like what I can and can't do, and putting me in this box and trying to keep me down and trying to keep me there with him.
Right.
So yeah,
okay, we're gonna advance a little bit, because there came a time where your name is now being ripped apart by this pastor because you officially left the church. You were like, enough is enough, which congratulations on that awareness, because you had 10 years of grooming abuse, so that into adulthood, you didn't even realize the manipulative factors that were happening every day. And so when you leave, your name is now ripped through the church, and people that were there that were listening to these messages, they are currently still in the church, in that same church?
a lot of people, yes.
Okay, so now you have people, and this is why we're talking about this, because you have people who know what is going on, or at least they are aware that something did happen, and yet they are still, praising the hallelujahs of this pastor who obviously does not have a relationship with God, because I don't believe anyone who does wrong, when we are spiritually connected and anointed with God, we stop and say, okay, no, because God's not going to like this, or he's not going to be pleased with this. And then that doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
So this, I refuse to acknowledge that this was a person of God. I won't.
Yeah.
But now the work that you do, you want churches to understand that when they don't talk about this behavior, when they allow the person to still be in the church, they are protecting the secret. How do we then protect our young girls?
Honestly, the term narcissist and manipulation need to be widespread. That needs to be discussed, because I did not know about, I always thought that was, like, no disrespect, but I always thought that happened or occurred in Catholic churches. I never thought, Black Christian churches were doing these types of things. And it's not necessarily about Black, white, it's widespread. And so because it's so widespread, the conversations about narcissistic tactics, narcissistic abuse, verbal abuse, manipulation, mind manipulation, all these tactics need to be discussed. What it looks like. My pastor would walk through the church and tickle us. He would tickle me. He would tickle married women. Inappropriate, but he would do it in front of everybody. He would do it Wednesday after service, Friday after prayer, Sunday after service. If I'm at dance practice or any other practice, he would be tickling women. He tickled me. He tickled other leaders that were married, other young girls. He was always tickling or touching or flicking or doing something. And he would specifically with me come behind me and grab my sides and have me drop into him. And people saw this and they thought, oh, he's just playing with her. That's like a daughter to him. No, my daddy don't even tickle me. We need to
Right,
have these
right. And when you're young, you don't know
conversations.
that. Yeah.
No,
Oh
you
my
don't.
God.
And especially if you're looking up to these older women and they're being tickled.
Yeah.
And so I feel and I believe that these conversations about inappropriate behavior, don't let these men touch you. I don't care what title they
Right.
have. My family was really big on it doesn't matter what title people have, there's always a boss above the boss. You never let
Mhm.
anybody disrespect you. But for whatever reason, when it comes to the house of God, that whole don't touch God's anointed is so completely the concept is just
Uh-uh.
misconstrued. Number
Okay.
one, all of us have anointing,
Mhm.
all of us. And if a pastor is being inappropriate, he is not a part of the brethren at that moment, and he is not acting in accordance to what God has told him
Right.
very clearly in First and Second Timothy, and so he needs to be corrected. You
Exactly.
mean to tell me God left me here without any defense? You mean to tell me my 18-year-old daughter and this 65-year-old pastor, and he's trying to hit on my daughter, and I don't have any will or any right in the house of God to correct him
Right.
and tell him that belongs to me, get back before my
Right.
husband or before me or someone else has to deal with you?
Has to deal
No.
with this,
And
right?
yeah, don't do that. Don't step this way, sir. And so I believe that these conversations about appropriate behavior and inappropriate behavior needs to be widespread and to stop giving these pastors passes because we're taking
Right.
the scripture out of context. Oh, God's anointed. So number one, correctly reading and dissecting your Bible. And number two, having these conversations with these young women and teaching them, don't just go to church and just trust people just because they're in church.
That
You
part.
sit back and you observe and you watch and you try the spirit by the spirit. If you see that they're gossiping,
Exactly.
if you see that they're belittling you, don't ever let nobody tell you who you are. First of all, the Bible says don't despise your youth. So I'm never going to let somebody else come and try to talk down to you or belittle you because you're of your age,
Right.
or just, I remember this was so big. This is so big. And this goes to just in general outside of the church, making the victims wear the responsibility of their abuser.
That.
It is
Oh.
not my responsibility because you can
Mhm.
see my shape and my pants fit that I have to cover up now and wear a shirt that goes down to the back of my knees. I'm
Right.
5'11". I be doggone. We're not doing all of that.
We're not
I'm
doing
not
that.
I'm not dressing frumpy because you don't know how to control your flesh. That is your responsibility. It is not mine. I'm not going to walk around with the shirt that come up to here looking like somebody's nun because you can't control your eyes. We need to talk about
Right.
these things. We need
It's
to
yeah,
discuss
we do.
appropriately what is your responsibility, you know, how you need to behave and handle yourself, and what their
Mhm.
responsibility is, and how they need to behave and handle themselves, and what you need to be careful of, and what you need to look out for as a young woman. And
And
don't let
when
anybody manipulate.
right, and when that leader of the church steps outside of those boundaries,
Yeah.
the rest of the people in the church need to say, hey, no, we're not dealing with this. You got to go. We have a duty to protect the people here, especially our young girls. So
Yes. Yes.
before we wrap up, because I do want to really make mention and talk about the importance of these conversations with these little girls. And in our conversation, you talked about the way that God viewed you was so incredibly important. You were taught, don't have sex before marriage. You got to be a virgin. You have to do this. You have to do that because this is how God sees you. How do we need to really address these concerns and conversations with our daughters so that they understand that God still loves you and God doesn't see you as this bad person because you do this or you do that? What are these conversations that we need to have so that our young girls feel safe in being able to express themselves and have these conversations with other people if they need to?
Be real. I feel like so many people are afraid to say, I felt like that. I got hot and bothered. I got this. I got that. I made mistakes. I slept with this person, or I allowed people to manipulate me. I allowed a narcissist to abuse me, and I kept coming. Do have those real conversations so that number one, they can identify, and number
Mhm.
two, you're creating a safe haven and a safe space for them to come clean and to come out and to get help. Because if they're expressing a story to me and I can clearly see, oh, boop, 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 red flag, and they don't know it, they're never going to be able to feel comfortable enough, and
Right.
I can never give them something. I can never talk to them and be real with them if I haven't created that environment. And in order to create that environment, what I've recognized, especially doing this, being an advocate and mentoring these young women again, I've recognized that in my truth, it's setting them free. they're feeling comfortable to talk about it. And so I would say, let's normalize our bodies. Let's normalize how God made us, the sex appeal, the beauty, the whatever. Let's
Right.
normalize this and to not shame our young women, and that dates back to even slavery. Even before that,
Right.
I can guarantee you back to biblical times. Adultifying these young women. It's called adultification. And we want to always, you need to cover up and you need this and you need that. And it's like, we don't even recognize that was a strategy and a tactic from men to make it okay to look at these young women and to rape them and to be with them. And so we've taken that and we're still putting the responsibility on these young
On the
women. And
girl.
so, yeah, in order to fight that and to tear that down, we got to stop being ashamed. We have to heal. And if we can heal and we can stop being ashamed and we can say, God made me this way. No, I'm not going to wear a parka in 110-degree weather. I'm going to wear these shorts and I'm going to put on this spaghetti strap and you're going to keep pushing and control your eyes. That is your responsibility. I'm not wearing the jacket of your lust. And nor am I going to teach my young daughter to do it. You fixed it before I have to don't do that. Don't come for my baby. And so I feel like as women, we have the responsibility of, number one, healing. Number two, being open and honest with our shortcomings, our mistakes, the things we have to learn, our lessons in life, and putting the proper responsibility back on the appropriate party. I'm not going to teach my daughter how to wear their lust and how to wear their issues. No, my daughter is going to be free to be who she is and to dress how she's comfortable. And that's how we're going to go about this. And to not to make these young women think that virginity makes them who they are. You're worth it with it. You're worth it without it. And I feel
That
like
part,
that needs to be
that
spoken.
part.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm so glad that we had this conversation, and I am going to have you back so we can go a little bit deeper and just really unpack some of this so that people can understand on a deeper level what's actually happening. And no, I'm not saying this is happening in every single church, because I know people are watching and saying like, not in my church, that ain't happening in my church. Listen, anytime bad behaviors are being silenced, you are allowing them to thrive. And that is what this topic and this conversation was about. So Jireh, thank you so much for being open and honest about your experiences. Thank you for taking in these young girls to have these conversations so that they know what to look out for. They know how to protect themselves. They know how to honor themselves as well, because that's so important. So I just appreciate you being here. Again, I got to have you back. So thank you so much. Before we go ahead and tell people how they would be able to reach out to you or contact you or follow you on social media. Go ahead and let us know.
You can email me at shoe, SHOEJIREH @gmail.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at Layana's Lashes, LAYANAS or find me on Facebook, Jireh Shoe.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jireh.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Whew. I know y'all are all taking a deep breath, because even just me watching it back, there were a lot of like, oh my God, are you serious? Like, I'm having those moments and those thoughts. And this is the reason why I have to have her back, because listen to some of the things that she said and identify if any of this is going on around you. Are there young girls that you know that are having trouble at home? Who are they trusting with the hurt that they're experiencing at home? Or if they don't have a good, a child that doesn't have a good relationship with their parents, what love or attention maybe are they seeking out in the wrong way? And it's not even that she was seeking attention in the wrong way, but somebody saw an opportunity to use her family's discord against her. So we have to really look at that. And we really need to be mindful of how we are raising our young girls to value themselves. Are we really having these open conversations versus just putting it off on, well, God has to see you this way. You can't do this. You can't do that. But then as a young girl, you're thinking of these things. You're wondering why your body is developing and no one is talking to you. We have got to get to a point where we have open conversations, age appropriate conversations. But it's so important. And that's why I wanted Jireh on the show. We're going to talk to her next Wednesday. So please be back for next Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for She Is Shenomenal. We want to unpack this a little bit more because our goal is to make sure that our children are safe no matter where they are, but they for darn sure should be safe in church. I'll see you guys next week. Have a good one.